here today, and welcome to the opening ceremony of the 3rd Global Tourism and Hospitality Conference, Hong Kong 2017. It is my great pleasure to be the MC today. My name is Victoria, a master student of Global Hospitality Business Program of School of Hotel and Tourism Management.
And I'm Jafari, a bachelor student of Hotel Management in HCM. The ceremony will be starting shortly. We will appreciate if you could switch your mobile phone to silence mode. Thank you.
So now let's welcome our guest of honor and the speaker for matching session. Please rise.
Please be seated, thank you. Please welcome the 2-time solo harmonica world champion, Soey Leo, to perform a song to us. Wow, thank you, Leo. What a great performance. The song Fight of the Bumblebee is the fastest song in the world. Thank you for the distinctive and powerful performance ever in our opening ceremony, which definitely achieved our conference theme, innovation. Leo is actually our PolyU alumni who is currently a professional musician and international endorser of Horn Harmonica. He has performed it in 40 cities in past year. Once again, please give a round of applause to thank you, Leo.
Thank you, Leo. So now everyone, please join me to give a warm welcome to President Timothy Tong of Hong Kong Polytechnic University.
Good morning. Did you like C.Y. Liu's performance? I think he deserves another round of applause. You know, working at a university, one of the greatest pleasure is to witness the growth of our students. C.Y., I've known him since his first year at the university. And I've been at his performances numerous times. So I've seen him grow as well as to mature during this entire time. And now he's a professional musician. I certainly wish him all the success in the future. Let's give him another round of applause to encourage him. Thank you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's great to see all of you with us this morning, participating at the 3rd Global Tourism and Hospitality Conference. First of all, let me extend a very warm welcome to several of our distinguished guests, the Commissioner for Tourism, Ms. Kathy Chu. Please stand, give her a round of applause. Welcome, Kathy. Executive Director of the Federation of Hong Kong Hotel Owners, Mr. Michael Lee. Michael. And General Manager, Corporate Affairs of the Hong Kong Tourism Board, Ms. Cynthia Leung. Cynthia, thank you for coming. Okay. I'm also delighted to welcome all the 6 Ulysses Prize laureates of the World Tourism Organization. May I invite them to stand so that we can extend the warmest welcome to them, please. Thank you for coming to support us. And of course, a warm welcome to all the eminent speakers coming from various parts of the world. They will share with us their ideas and latest research findings on innovations and trends, as well as challenges and opportunities related to global tourism and hospitality industry. I'm sure we can all learn a lot from them. Tourism is a driver for economic growth. According to the World Travel and Tourism Council, the industry has been growing fast for 6 consecutive years. Its contribution accounts for just slightly over 10% of the global GDP in 2016, and is providing 1 out of 10 jobs in the world. Tourism is also a means to connect the world, close the gaps between cultures, and promote friendships among nations. It's an instrument to build a common humanity. At its core, tourism and hospitality is a people business. Indeed, PolyU is committed to nurturing graduates who will not only serve well in the industry, but to become leaders for the industry. I'm pleased to share with you that PolyU's School of Hotel and Tourism Management is recognized as one of the top educational programs in the world. In 2017, earlier this year, the QS World University Rankings placed PolyU 3rd in the subject category of hospitality and leisure management. And ladies and gentlemen, that's 3rd in the entire world. So I think it's a tremendous reflection of the quality of our School of Hotel and Tourism Management. I think we should give Kei Chong and his colleagues a round of applause for a job well done. Congratulations. Owned by PolyU, Hotel Icon is the world's first full-service commercial hotel, wholly integrated with an academic institution, providing hospitality education at a university level. At this conference, our guests from around the world will witness how our students grasp the learning opportunity at Hotel Icon. As a matter of fact, the organizing committee of the conference is formed by 48 final year students, and another 100 or so act as volunteers to help it run smoothly. And these are students from our School of Hotel and Tourism Management. May I ask them to just wave their hands so that we can see where you are? All the students on the organizing committee and all the students helping. Please just wave your hand. Congratulations. Congratulations. This conference is organized as a celebratory event of PolyU's 80th anniversary. Yes, we are celebrating our 80th anniversary this year. In this important milestone, we have always been thinking about how to create a better future, especially for our young generations. And we have set our anniversary theme as Opening Minds, Shaping the Future. I'm sure the discussions that will take place in these 3 days will broaden our students' horizon and inspire them to shape the future for themselves and for society. To our guests from abroad, I hope you will enjoy your stay in Hong Kong and will find time to do some sightseeing. To every one of you, I wish you a very successful conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President Tong. Thank you. So continuing with the success of the Peers 2 conference, we are extending the theme of innovation, research, education by serving such an important networking platform for education, students, and industry practitioners to exchange insiders related to innovations, trends, opportunities, and challenges of global tourism and hospitality. So now please join me to welcome our Professor Kay Chong, Dean and Chair Professor of School of Hotel and Tourism Management for the welcome speech. Professor Chong, please.
Ms. Kathy Xu, Mr. Michael Lee, Ms. Cynthia Leung, fellow Ulysses laureates, President Tong, distinguished speakers, conference delegates, colleagues, students, ladies and gentlemen, very good morning. On behalf of the School of Hotel and Tourism Management at Hong Kong PolyU, I'd like to extend my warm welcome to everybody to the third Global Tourism Hospitality Conference. This conference theme is innovation, research, and education. We believe these are very important key words for sustaining growth of tourism and also further development of education in the field of tourism and hospitality. Hotel Icon is renowned for many innovative ideas that have been experimented, and then innovative ideas which have been successful in Hotel Icon are now spread, utilized by many other hotels, not only in Hong Kong, but across the world. The research we conduct is not only just publishing papers in journals, but also to create impact in our society. There are a few good examples from our school. A group of researchers in our school developed a tourism forecasting arrival system. That system has been so well received. It has been adopted by Pacific Asia Travel Association. Now it is used as a tool to make a forecast for tourism arrivals in 64 countries and regions throughout in Asia Pacific. Another good example is a tourist satisfaction index that our professors in our school developed to measure the level of tourist satisfaction in a particular destination, which was invented and created by our school, now utilized not only in Hong Kong, but some other cities around the world. These are some good examples. Hotel Icon is renowned for its innovative ideas. I'm sure that during the 3 days here, you'll have a chance to see some of these new innovative ideas we brought in to Hotel Icon in operation and also in creating new value for the customers. When it comes to education, our school is known to be very innovative. A few examples. 2 years ago, our school launched a global master's degree in hospitality management in partnership with Lausanne Hotel School and University of Houston, believing that the future leaders in our industry has to be very much globally minded. The students are coming from different parts of the world, spending 1 semester each in Switzerland, in Hong Kong, and Houston, and getting 1 degree at the end. The first year we had 27 students from 18 countries enrolled in the program. In the second year, 42 students from 19 countries. So this is one example. Last year, we launched the MicroMaster MOOC-based program in collaboration with edX. As you know, edX is a platform created by MIT and Harvard. MicroMasters in Hospitality and Tourism, in which we are offering 4 courses online, which has brought 25,000 students from 159 countries enrolled in this program. For each of these subjects, such as luxury management and hospitality, and information technology and hospitality and tourism, human resources management and hospitality, and hospitality and tourism marketing, we see that there are more than 10,000 students enrolled in each of these programs. As President mentioned, we are very proud that a group of our undergraduate students each year organizing this class, the conference. We have a class called Special Events. It's a capstone project class for those students studying convention and event management. They are spending 1 year organizing conference. Organizing a conference of this size and this magnitude requires a lot of thinking and planning. The students have done all, budgeting, planning, and programming. And oftentimes, we see many PCOs, professional conference organizers, commenting that these are some of the best conferences they have seen organized. In fact, the students are becoming more entrepreneurial. Recently, they formed a club called SHTM Event Society, which is a club for students' professional development, but also the purpose of this club is to serve as a company organizing conferences at PolyU. The conference is organized by different departments. They will serve as professional PCOs, professional conference organizers. So this is a good entrepreneurship training with some innovative ideas. This conference has brought together more than 300 participants from more than 30 countries from every continent of the world. And we are very pleased to have you in our school, in Hotel Icon, and hope this will be a very fruitful conference. One important aspect of the conference is for us to meet and then interact and network with others who are in the conference. So I hope you'll have a chance to get to know each other, get to meet. I certainly will go out and get to meet everybody in the conference. Thank you very much. Enjoy the conference.
Thank you, Dean Chong. Please remain on stage.
For the official opening, we're delighted to invite the guest of honor and UNWTO Ulysses Prize Laureate to come on stage to join the kick-off ceremony.
Let's welcome President Tong of the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. Ms. Kathy Ju, Commissioner for Tourism of Tourism Commission. Mr. Michael Lee, Executive Director of the Federation of Hong Kong Hotel Owners. Ms. Cynthia Leung, General Manager, Corporate Affairs of Hong Kong Tourism Board.
Welcome.
And the UNWTO Ulysses Prize Laureate, Professor David Airey. Professor Donald Hawkins, Professor Eduardo Fayo Sola, Professor Jafar Jafari, Professor Pauline Shelton, and Professor Richard Butler.
As a global conference held in Hong Kong, each honorable guest is holding an iconic building of Hong Kong and will insert these symbolic buildings to make a complete skyline of the city. It emblems that everyone puts a great contribution to the tourism and hospitality industry and make it a comprehensive success. So please hold it and let's calm down. Ready?
3, 2, 1.
The skyline lights up, that means hospitality and tourism will shine infinitely.
Thank you all our honorable guests. Let's take a group photo to capture these memorable moments. Let's take a group photo right now, shall we?
Thank you, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Please be seated. Thank you, everyone. Please be seated. Thank you.
A warm reminder, the concurrent paper section will be at the first floor and the basement 1 at 11:30. Luncheon will be at the Silver Box Ballroom, which is here, at 1 p.m. For more information, you can find out the details from the program booklets and apps to attend the various activity. See you later.
So now it's time to move on to the plenary session. UNWTO Ulysses Prize Laureate Open Forum, Part 1. So may I introduce 3 laureates and honorable speakers today. Professor David Airey, Professor Donald Hawkins, and Professor Jafar Jafari. Please welcome to the stage. And also, we would like to invite the session chairs, the PhD student of SHTM, Ms. Soey and Ms. Mohammad Shahidul. Excuse me. And now I will pass the time to Ms. Lei. Sure. Yep. Okay, thank you very much, professors. Please be seated. Thank you. So, dear honorable guests, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining this section, UNWTO Ulysses Prize Laureate Forum, Open Forum, Part 1. My name is Soey. I'm from Macau. I'm a PhD student in the School of Hotel and Tourism Management in the Hong Kong Polytechnic University.
And I'm Mohammad Shahidul Islam. I'm from Bangladesh. I'm also a PhD student at the School of Hotel and Tourism Management of the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. Thank you.
Thank you. So it is truly our honor to be the moderators of this section today, where we have a valuable opportunities to learn from 3 UNWTO Ulysses Prize winners. So let us start briefly introduce each of them. I'm sure a lot of you already know them. So first of all, sitting over there, we have Professor Donald Hawkins. Professor Hawkins, he is the Solimar International's chairman and principal. He's an expert in tourism policy, strategic planning, workforce development, and management education with 42 years of international experience. Professor Hawkins holds the endowed Eisenhower Professor of Tourism Policy Chair at the George Washington University School of Business. In 2003, he received the first UNWTO Ulysses Prize for individual accomplishments in the creation and dissemination of knowledge in the area of tourism policy and strategic management. In 2012, he was elected as Vice Chairman of the UNWTO Affiliates Council, and he was appointed as the Special Advisor to the UNWTO Secretary General for the Knowledge Network. He also serves on the board of directors for the Ulysses Foundation as Chairman Emeritus of Sustainable Travel International.
Thank you, Ms. Soey. Here we have also Professor Jafari. Professor Jafari is a cultural anthropologist and a hotel administration graduate with an honorary doctorate from the Universitat de les Balears, Spain. He is a visiting professor of the University do Algarve, Portugal, Lowly University of Technology, Sweden, Sun Yat-sen University, China, lifetime honorary professorship of Bundelkhand University, India. He is an international program director of the University de les Balears, and he is a faculty member of the University of Wisconsin-Stout. Professor Jafari is also serving as editor-in-chief of Annals of Tourism Research. Professor Jafari is chief editor of the Tourism Social Science series and the Encyclopedia of Tourism, co-chief editor of the Bridging Tourism Theory and Practice book series. Professor Jafari is a consulting and founding editor of Information Technology and Tourism and founding president of the International Academy for the Study of Tourism. Together with Professor Pauline Sheldon, he co-founded TriNet, the Tourism Research Information Network.
Thank you. So last but not least, we have Professor David Airey sitting in the middle on the stage. Professor Airey is Emeritus Professor at the University of Surrey in the UK. He has been involved in tourism education for more than 40 years, as an academic, as an official with the UK government, and as a technical expert with the European Commission. At Surrey, he served as head of school and as the Pro-Vice-Chancellor for many years until he formally retired in 2014. Since then, he has continued his work in research, in teaching, and in consultancy in the UK and overseas. His recent academic work has focused on tourism education and tourism policy. He is a fellow of the International Academy for the Study of Tourism. In 2006, he received the UNWTO Ulysses Prize for his contribution to tourism education. So thank you very much all for being with us here today. So before we kick off the questions, Shahidul will introduce a little bit the UNWTO Ulysses Prize.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, UNWTO Ulysses Prize is an award given by the UNWTO to distinguished scholars, whether in academia, government, or private industry, for outstanding contributions to innovation and knowledge in tourism. The UNWTO Ulysses Prize is also commonly known as the Nobel Prize in Tourism. Ladies and gentlemen, so this time is a section for guest speakers, and this section will be conducted in a conversational format. First of all, we'll have a list of questions to our honorable panel. But at the same time, with the due respect, because of time limitation, our guest speakers are most welcome to finish answering each question in less than 3 minutes. Thank you very much for your kind cooperation. After that, we'll open the questions to the floor. Thank you. So, here the first question. Any speaker is welcome to start first, conveniently. Here first question goes. Since tourism sector was less popular in the past, comparatively the young one at that time. So, in this juncture, why you were attracted by the tourism field at the beginning of your career?
So let's just go around, and who would like to start first?
Do you want an honest answer to that?
Yeah, okay.
Because the honest answer to that is when I left university, I had absolutely no idea what I wanted to do, and I thought to travel would actually be quite a nice thing. And if I joined the tourism sector, I would be able to travel. And sure enough, I find myself in Hong Kong. So 45 years later, it kind of worked, didn't it? But more seriously, I don't know how I came to this view, but I'm an economist by background. At the end of my studies, people from my graduating year we wouldn't have looked at tourism because it wasn't considered sensible or serious at that time. Most of my colleagues who went into working had their eyes on the manufacturing sector. For some reason, and I don't know how this happened, I thought the service sector was actually rather interesting, and within that tourism was interesting, partly for the reasons I've already said, because sure enough, from 1960, whenever it was, 1970, that I first graduated, the tourism industry has shown remarkable growth. So in my case, it was a kind of an accidental, but there must have been some thought behind it.
Thank you so much. So, Professor Hawkins.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, let's go back 70 years ago. It was 1967. I had just gotten married, and I started my first full-time job in tourism in the Pocono Mountains. I had no idea what tourism was all about. In fact, I didn't even associate this job I had as a bartender as being in the tourism field. And little did I know that I was right there at the cusp of the golden age of tourism. You know, after the Second World War, everything seemed to work economically. We had tremendous growth. We mentioned Dwight D. Eisenhower, earlier. It was his term. He started the federal highway system. He expanded the national parks. And through his administration, he popularized jet travel. Little did I know all this was happening around me. Pan Am was created. They started the first jet trips. We had the great innovators. Kermit Wilson started Holiday Inns. Walt Disney started Disneyland. We began also seeing this term, timeshare, which was borrowed from the computer industry, emerge. And that was the beginnings of what now we're talking, Airbnb and all those shared economy types of activities. So many of these things were ongoing at that time, but I had no idea that I was even close to the tourism field. The bartender job eventually got me some work in youth in Phillipsburg, New Jersey. That led to being appointed superintendent of parks and recreation. And from there, I did a number of community development activities, and then I ended up in Washington, D.C., working for Lawrence Rockefeller when the Outdoor Recreation Resources Review Commission was approved. It was the early beginnings of what we now call ecotourism. So I'm here. I've been here for 70 years, but none of it has been systematically planned. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Would you like to say something? All right, sir.
Well, thank you and good morning. Actually, echoing what the other two speakers said, most of us who are in the field of tourism are more than 50 years old or 60 years old.
Excuse me?
Or 70 years old.
Microphone, sir.
Yes, thank you. None of us studied tourism as such. We all came through the back door, middle road. Somehow we got into tourism. I did 4 volumes of books, which is the story of 60 scholars in the field of tourism. And all 60 of them, these are well-known scholars whose contributions you know, in economics, in geography, in sociology, anthropology, marketing management. And all the 60 of them did not come through the door of tourism, did not study tourism. Each one of them came coincidentally, as both of you implied, to tourism. It's very interesting to read the history of these people. It's written by themselves from the beginning to the present time. Now, how did I come to tourism? I needed to support myself educationally. I got a job as a tour guide, and that did it. I think tour guide is a very comprehensive job in the sense that it would acquaint you with transportation, with hotel system, with the tourists from different countries. And that is when I got the idea that I want to study hotel management, because then there was no tourism management degrees. Hotel management existed, and every tourist that I mentioned this to, they said, well, go to Cornell University. Polytechnic, your Polytechnic had not opened the doors yet to hospitality tourism. Otherwise, I would have applied here with pleasure. So I applied to Cornell and spent 4 years of studying, 3 years, finishing my bachelor's degree there, and then I got a master's degree with them. Then I realized that I want more. And since I had started with tour guide, I realized that tourism is truly a sociocultural phenomenon. To understand tourism, you need to know sociology, you need to know anthropology, you need to know psychology. So I decided to get my PhD in cultural anthropology, and that really gave me the perspectives I needed to understand the making and the functioning of tourism as a sociocultural phenomenon. It has been a good journey of learning, and of course, while going to college, and I did do some practical work in hotels as well. So my foot has been mostly in academic community, but I did work in the industry as well.
Thank you so much. So, the next question. Looking back over several decades of your experiences, both in the academia and the industry, how did you see the evolution of tourism sector in those years? Because you have many decades experiences. So what was the evolution of tourism sector in those days? I mean 60s, 70s, 80s, into the millennia.
Do you want me to start?
Yes, please.
This always happens to me because my name begins with A, you see. So if your name begins with A, you're always in the front line. It's always a bit of a dangerous place to be because you're the first one to be shot. I will answer it from the field in which I have the most knowledge and expertise, which is the field of tourism education, which is what I've endeavoured to plot over the time I've been working in tourism. And it's a two-part answer to your question. The first is, what I've actually, clearly tourism began as a subject way back in, I guess, as far as the UK is concerned, about 1966, 1967, but as a relatively disorganized, disconnected, and fragmented kind of area of study. And what I have seen over those 40 years is the maturing of a subject, and I would like to have seen it as a long, slow progression from being an area which was initially concerned with training people for their first job in tourism. And as one of my colleagues used to say, it was about leaving students surprise-free when they went into the tourism industry. I would like to see it as a long, slow progression into tourism taking its place in the academy as a social science along with other social sciences. And in other words, there's been a maturing of the subject, which is not just about training people from industry, nor is it just about business. It's about society, it's about the environment, it's about ethics, it's about spirituality, most recently, as a well-rounded subject. That's how I would like to have seen it, but, and it's a very big but, in the middle of all that, that lovely slow period of progression, we had neoliberalism emerge. And neoliberalism, which was typified by the contributions of Reagan and Thatcher, which found expression in the airline industry by the deregulation of airlines, it actually took a long time before that hit the university sector, but it hit the university sector, it did, with huge effects, in my view, and it really significantly interrupted that slow progression of a subject like tourism. And because what it did in the university sector, it introduced massive competition between universities. Massive competition leads to universities seeing how they're doing better than other universities, which immediately leads to metrics, which leads to measurement, which leads to league tables. And in that world, tourism has actually really found it quite difficult to survive against other subject areas. And I mean, I worked in university with a responsibility across the whole of the university, and when you look at tourism against medicine, for example, or when you look at tourism against mathematics or physics, it's actually quite difficult to maintain the argument that tourism is an important thing to study. And I think tourism went through a very wobbly few years, from which it was just beginning to recover, and now we've got Trumpism. And Trumpism, with everything that's associated with that, of not believing in experts, not believing in academies, not believing in truth, but creating truth. What role? I mean, I think over the next few years, we will be grappling with what universities are about, what they are to achieve, and as far as tourism is concerned, what we can contribute in speaking truth to power, which is what the traditional job of university is. Sorry, that is my 3 minutes, so I only dealt with one part of it, and I'll stop there.
Thank you so much. It's a nice, thoughtful answer. We got some evaluations from the tourism sector. Thank you so much. So, Professor Hawkins or Professor Jafari, you can also make answer on it.
Well, I'm not going to start with Trumpism, I'll tell you that. I got started in tourism more using the Dewey philosophy, learning by doing. I had very little coursework that prepared me in any way, shape, or form for the practice of tourism, although I had a degree in sociology, one in education. Then I finally gravitated toward a program at NYU that focused on parks management and conservation. And that turned out to be my early stage discipline, and I learned by doing, by working, first of all with the U.S. Department of Education on a career education program that dealt with transportation, hospitality, and tourism. And then I ended up, as I mentioned earlier, with the National Recreation Park Association as their director of research, started the Journal of Leisure Research, which is still published this day as the founding editor, and got involved very much in the environmental movement with Project Man's Environment, funded through the National Park Service. We were instrumental in starting Earth Day many years ago. And from there, I started doing some teaching because I had just gotten my doctorate from NYU. So I taught at the University of Maryland, University of New Mexico, and then finally at George Washington University. My first course that I taught was called Tourism, Environment, and the Quality of Life. So, I mean, if you will, that's the triple bottom line. Tourism being the economic generator, environment, culture, and nature being fundamental to tourism. And finally, the quality of life, improving quality of life of the visitors, and even more importantly, the quality of life of local people. So then I ended up moving into the university sphere. And believe me, it's been a survival of the fittest. I just retired after 45 years at GW, and nothing was easy. We basically had to claw our way up, academics, but we succeeded, mainly because we depended upon our own resources. We were able to attract funding and support from the industry, and we started one of the first master's degree about the same time as the University of Surrey did. And about 10 years after we started, we met informally with some of the Surrey people and found out we were basically doing very similar things. We always looked at innovation as the key, and I think we were one of the first to really take what was called the MICE, Market Meeting Incentive Conference Events. We simplified it. We call it the event management sector, and we started that 22 years ago at George Washington University, just as we were very innovative in recognizing that outdoor recreation morphed into something that we call ecotourism. And most of the principles of sustainable tourism that we use today were actually developed during the ecotourism era. So we made, substantial advances, not only in theory and concept, but in practice. So it really brings me here, today we're all kind of what you call emeritus professors. But, I haven't stopped learning by doing. My conclusion of a long career of 60 years is we need to integrate practice with academics. In fact, there's even a term for that now. It's called pracademic. And I'm kind of proud to be a pracademic. When I first started in academics, I wasn't that proud. I didn't recognize that there were others like me that were practicing at the same time involved, in the theoretical, the research, and the innovative side of education. So the word that I have for the young people, and maybe that's a later question, is get as much involvement in practice, either before you get into the academic life or while you're in the academic life, and never stop while you're in practice or in academics over the long term. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Professor Jafar.
And I take it that when you say tourism sector, you mean tourism education in this case, field of tourism.
Both of industry and tourism academy.
All right. It's difficult to talk about both of them in 3 minutes. How about
So anyway, sir.
Education, I can echo my colleagues that for us, tourism education has been a struggle to legitimize ourselves, to say we are here, we have arrived, we have something to say. And they would say that, no, you're not a field of study, you're not serious. Many universities refused to open their doors to hospitality and education many years ago. In the United States, the first university that opened its doors to hotel administration was Cornell in 1922. Then nothing happened, maybe you can correct me, until 1960s when Michigan State University opened its doors. And then after that, bang, bang started happening. But still I have, even at this time, I see sometimes I have to explain myself to people when I say I teach tourism. When a stranger asks me, what do you teach, I try not to say tourism, I say management or something like that. Especially in the plane, the person sitting next to you, oh, so what do you do? As soon as I say tourism, they say, oh, where should I go for my vacation? I mean, that's the very first thing they think we do. We are traveling. Not that travel agents are no good, but that's the only conception they have about, understanding they have about tourism. They don't realize that tourism is economic muscle. They don't realize that tourism is a sociocultural phenomenon. They don't realize that tourism is the largest peacetime movement in the history of mankind. There is no industry that mobilizes people as much as tourism does in the time of peace. And still we have to explain to people what tourism is. And it continues to be, because tourism is fun. Fun is not serious to study. And I think that is the challenge even the younger generation still have in the area of explaining who you are, what you are doing, And my scholar activities are as good as, since you mentioned mathematics, as strong as good as mathematics, at par as mathematics. Of course, we need mathematics, we need statistics, we need geography, and tourism is all of those, and that's how we do best.
Thank you so much, sir.
Can I come back on? Am I allowed to?
For 30 seconds, please.
For 30 seconds, because it actually picks the point that Jafar just made, and I don't want to end my comments on a sort of a negative note, because I actually see tourism as a fantastic vehicle to provide an education for people in relation to a very, very complex world. Because tourism is multidisciplinary, it's multi-method, it's multidimensional, it actually brings all these things together, and including things like ethics, like spirituality, by protection of the world, relationship with the world environment, it is a fantastically rich area of study. And I think if we can get that communicated, tourism actually has a very, very good place in the academy.
Thank you so much. To add something on it. Thank you, sir. So now I would like to find some inspirations for you, to find inspirations for us. So in this time, I'd like to make two questions. First question is, what was your inspiration for your contribution in the tourism sector? What was the driving forces you got to contribute to this industry? Once again, thank you, sir.
I can see a pattern emerging here. I thought if I ended the last one, somebody else would start this one. But anyway, you see, I'm useless at this sort of thing. Well, I guess the inspiration for me was twofold. One is that I became genuinely interested in education as education, and the process that, I certainly wasn't interested in that when I first started at the University of Surrey. I saw myself as an economist who was looking at tourism, but I very quickly discovered that my economics knowledge wasn't actually quite good enough for me to be a fully fledged economist. So I started looking around other things, and I just think the process of education of young adults who are at university, and also some older adults who are at university, is just such an interesting process to get involved in. And it was that took my interest in education, linking it together with tourism, which was a rapidly developing tourism, gave me a huge amount of interest in pulling together issues related to the curriculum, to pedagogy in tourism, why it was operating like this, what were the gaps. And that has been hugely satisfying for me to see how tourism has come through in the educational world. That was prompt number one. Prompt number two was, as part of my life, I did spend 8 years working for the British government in a policy position, and that opened another door, which is in the whole world of policy making, because I saw policy making from the inside, working for the government, and was directly involved in a lot of the policies. So when I came back into academia, I had this second string in my bow, which is trying to understand how tourism fits into the policy agenda of mainly the public authorities, whether it be a national level or local level, and discovered a very, very confusing world indeed of the policy-making processes for tourism are really, on the whole, very, very poor, and that tourism is something of a poor relation when it comes to the main thrusts of government policy.
Thank you so much. Thank you to give us some inspirations, to know your inspirations. Thank you, sir. So, Professor Hawkins.
My inspiration was a little bit more focused on practicality. I started at George Washington University in the School of Medicine, where I headed up some rehab programs that had some tourism relationship. But then I had another opportunity through the university president to start a new graduate program. I analyzed what was going on in these areas. I looked at the environment field. There were many programs. I looked at hospitality, many hospitality programs, but I didn't find any tourism programs at all. So building upon environment and conservation, we launched our program there. And there was a tremendous need at that time, and we were able to attract support from the Organization of American Support States, and then from there we developed our master's degree program. But then I also had another inspiration, and that essentially it's nice to have a professional practice area, but how do we relate tourism to the more traditional disciplines? I'd already been able to do that in health through the medical school, and I was able to do it in education and human development, and then over the years I was also able to develop relationships with arts and sciences, particularly in the area of historic preservation, also with international development and trade, and I also got to know President Tim Tong, who was at that time the dean of the School of Engineering and Applied Sciences, and together we developed programs in aviation management and infrastructure and some other programs. So for me, it's this continuing need to stand alone, but at the same time find strategic relationships with more traditional disciplines in universities, and even more importantly, to find strategic relationships with people in government and industry.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yes, please.
Well, inspiration is the loaded word. Actually, my inspiration became my mission, sort of what I wanted to do. As I mentioned, legitimacy of hospitality and tourism was always, not being legitimate academic field was always an issue for me. When I said I want to teach tourism, they said, well, do you people have articles? Do you have books? And the answer then was no. Or if we had, was very few. In 1970 was the first book that appeared in tourism, 1971, Macintosh. And I think Burkett did it in 69, am I correct? No, 72. So you see, we had no textbook, tourism textbook until 1970s, and journals were extremely limited, and they were more reporting what was done rather than analyzing what was done. So that gave me the urge or the mission to borrow ideas from other fields. Why should we invent ideas if they're already there? So we need, for example, academic journals. So that gave birth to Annals of Tourism Research. And when I started the journal, everybody asked me, is there going to be a second issue? Is there going to be a third issue? And sometimes their questions became my question. But I said, I was telling myself my mission was to make it happen. So finally, a couple of years passed, and suddenly it had its own two legs and could walk. And now you see we have a large number of academic journals on board. And then it's important to borrow more ideas from the existing fields that have prestige, such as they referee articles. We were not refereeing articles then. I recall when I started refereeing articles, many of my colleagues felt I was insulting them. Actually, I do recall vividly, I sent an article authored by a colleague from Italy to be anonymously refereed. He wrote back to me and said, how dare you send my article to somebody else to evaluate? How do I know that that person knows the subject? So that was the beginning of it, that people would not take it lightly. But today, you don't want to publish in a journal which is not refereed. It has, the things have changed. So I think maybe my inspiration or my mission was to import as much as academic techniques as I could from other fields to tourism, so we become just like one of them. And I think we have, that mission has been accomplished with the help of lots of people.
Thank you so much. And we got the three kinds of inspirations, and this really enlightened us. Thank you. Sir, you have contributed a lot to this world, and you are really, really enlightened. And for several decades, you have made many contributions. So what specific contributions you think help you win this Ulysses Prize? And what does it mean to you, this prize?
I'm hoping somebody else is going to. Okay, I'll start, so we don't follow that, that syndrome, if you will. Well, you know, I got very much involved through tourism with the, at that time, World Tourism Organization, the UN World Tourism Organization, And when the United States was a member of the U.S. Travel Tourism Administration, I was always on the delegation selected by Department of State. So I got to know UNWTO right from the early stages in 1979 and 80. And then gradually I kept involved, and with the UNWTO in 1988, we formed the first university UNWTO center, which eventually developed into the Education Council, which became the Education Science Council, and now it's the Knowledge Network. And Dr. Eduardo Fios, when he's on tomorrow, will be able to describe that projection and the good and the bad and the ugly side of it. So having done that, I had this familiarity with international development. And I think today that's probably my number one passion. How do we take, as some of the speakers have said, this industry, which is the enormous transfer of wealth from rich countries to poor countries. And in 2015, we now have more travelers that go from developed to developing countries. It's a fantastic shift and change. And the world is dependent upon these poorer countries, as has been the case with China, to develop economically, to develop a middle class. When you get a middle class, you get domestic travel. As it emerges, you get into international travel. And really, that's going to be the stimulus, I think, for world economic growth. So right now, I'm more focused on how can we stimulate more international development and trade, and it's going to be a challenge within the Trump administration. But I've always found that it doesn't matter what the negativism you have at the top, you can find the ways and the means of getting your job done. Because most things are done not by people at the top down. It's done by the little people working in communities, working in departments and universities, working in these centers, if you will, using innovation, using data to show that you're making a difference. That's where the real change is all about. And that's really where I want to be. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Sir, please.
That's a real hard question because one has to evaluate himself. I got the award because they thought I was qualified. I do not know why I got the award. I was not on the committee who selected me. But if you ask me what you think you have done, what role you may have played, I think I have been a brokerage of knowledge. Providing the platform, the means and ways for disseminating knowledge. And that's extremely important. We need not only to develop knowledge, but we also have to disseminate it. And dissemination of knowledge is extremely important to have the avenues, the channels, the journals, the books, etc. to do. So in that respect, I would say transfer of knowledge is something that I have helped and continue doing so.
Nice. Thank you, sir.
But I want to also add something about Mr. Trump that Hawkins was talking about, and also David Airey talked about. Don't forget that he's the first hotel owner who became president of a country. He's one of us professionally, and sometimes we forget. Professionally, he's in this field. He's making money by your tourism.
Thank you so much.
Oh dear, I hope he didn't do a course in tourism education, because if he did, he didn't learn much, did he? In me speaking about ethics and spirituality and all the things that tourism might offer. Now, just a specific answer to your question, I would think the only reason that I got this award was for my work in education, which I guess is when I've parted this world, I would guess that's what I hope I might be remembered for, which is the work related to education, which is producing books, which is helping develop the curriculum, which is giving speeches, which is doing research, all related to education. And at the time, and it still is, education is an important activity for the UN World Tourism Organization, and it was partly in recognition for that I received the award, and the award does actually say it's for my contribution to education. What does it mean to me? Well, it got me invited here, didn't it? But beyond that, it has actually been extremely useful in kind of giving an added little bit of credibility to that world of tourism education, because the letters UN, whether it's got WTO after it or not is another matter, but the letters UN, United Nations, does actually carry a huge amount of weight in the world, and to be introduced as someone who has got this award, I guess people think, oh, we'd better just listen for a minute to see what this guy's got to say. I mean, they immediately turn off and say, oh no, he's got nothing to say. They may do that, but it actually opens a door. Thanks.
Thank you so much. So thank you making some experiences. We got many lessons from you. So this time, I would like to hand over to Ms. Soey to start something on contemporary issues, and I'll come back again.
Okay, so just now we talk a lot about the panel's experience and their background. So now I would like to move on to talk about the contemporary issues in the tourism industry. So, because my first question is related to what Professor Hawkins just now mentioned about the pracademic. So he emphasized the practical point when we do research and in our academic field. So my question for Professor Hawkins is, there have been calls both within and outside the tourism sectors that disconnection exists between the industry and the academia. So in your opinion, why does such disconnection exist?
It's a good question, and something that I've been working on for about 50 years. Generally, what you find when you do a systematic study of industry and you ask them what their needs are and how that can be translated into education, training, and human resource development, you really don't get unanimity, and you hardly have to work with industry to hone, those answers to a point of where they could be used by academics. But then when you also survey academics and you ask them what they think industry needs and how their curriculum responds, again, you don't have clear-cut relationships that have been developed. So you have a tremendous gap between what industry thinks they need and what education, provides. And by the way, that was the early stage of research that we did through George Washington University in collaboration with Eduardo Fios and Chris Cooper. It was more research on gap analysis, and then that eventually led to the TEDQual, certification system. So we really don't have effective working relationships between industry, government, and the university in many cases. But if you don't have it, it's absolutely essential. I think you see the benefit of that relationship here at Hong Kong Polytechnic with the Ministry of Tourism, with the Tourism Council, and all of the other industry partners working together. In Canada, they've done some very innovative work. It's called the Tourism Education Council, and they actually have formal relationships between universities and industry and also unions. And it's more like the ILO approach, and I would say that that's probably the way to go. We have to find more effective mechanisms for creating continuing relationships and co-planning of curriculum, collaborative, cooperative research programs, ways in which industry people can get practical experience. Because look around you, some of your fellow students, are they really getting much industry experience, or are they just getting more of the theoretical education? I'm particularly concerned with a lot of young PhD people who get the PhD but don't have any substantive industry experience. Now there's a way to do this. Marriott, for example, has a summer internship program for college professors. So I'd like to see much more interrelation between industry and academia.
Okay, great points. Would you like to say something?
It has always been, ever since I've been involved in tourism education, a huge surprise and disappointment that the links between industry and education are not much better than they are. And it came into very sharp focus with me in the period that I spent as a Pro-Vice Chancellor at Surrey, and Pro-Vice Chancellor in Hong Kong terms means I was the Deputy President of the unit, one of the Deputy Presidents. There were three of us. And my other two colleagues were both in the hard sciences. One was an IT specialist and one was a physicist. I remember having a conversation with the IT specialist one day, and he said something along the lines to me, saying, "Oh, I guess you have a lot of visits by, you know, the head of British Airways and the head of Thomson Holidays, as it then was, and the head of Virgin Atlantic." And I said, "No." I said, "I don't think the head of British Airways has ever been to the University of Surrey, and he wouldn't actually even think that it was relevant for him to come here." He said, "Well, that's odd." He said, "Because, you know, this morning I had the head of Nokia." He was a electronic communication guy, the head of Nokia in my office. Other mobile telephone organizations were in his office, and he said, "We would not move without having regular contact with such bodies." And it's a most curious thing that a department which was specialized in hospitality and tourism didn't have that daily contact with major players in the industry. And it is very surprising. The bright part in it is that we had excellent, and I think you do here as well in Hong Kong PolyU, excellent links with industry as far as professional placements are concerned, as far as internships with industry, but they never seemed then to develop from that into a full-blown relationship at all levels within the organizations in industry, be it hotel companies or airlines or tour operators and all the rest, that full-blown relationship with an academic department. We had odd instances where we had a relationship for a time. We've had odd initiatives, like for a long time we had a body called the National Liaison Group, and the National Liaison Group was a group which consisted of representatives of education institutions and of leaders of industry. But quite honestly, they never lasted very long. And it's very interesting to speculate on the reasons why. I mean, among the reasons are something to do with the structure of the tourism business, that it's a business with a huge number of SMEs. I mean, it does have some big players as well, but a lot of SMEs, high movement of people within the sector. Also something to do with, if you compare it with medicine, for example, that universities are not in the business, as they are with medicine, of coming up with cures for cancer and all that sort of thing, which of course the medical profession is very, very interested in. It's quite difficult to relate that world to the world of tourism. But it is something, and I guess Hong Kong PolyU is one of the leaders in this, in actually forging these relationships with industry. And I think possibly here lies an exception of Hong Kong PolyU having very good links, as far as I observe them as an outsider, with its industry. But by and large, the places that I have looked at do not have that easy, regular contact between the two.
Okay, Professor Jafar?
Thank you. Excellent comments. Yes, there is definitely a disconnect between the academic community in tourism and the tourism industry. We just have to put some historical perspective into this issue. Tourism education started sometimes in the last century. Depends where you take the beginning of it. Based on my research, Austria was the first one that opened its doors to tourism in the beginning of 1900. And it was slow movement in that area. But before that, before we stepped into the campus, there was a tourism industry, or travel and tourism. They were there for centuries without us. Travel and tourism was successful without textbooks, without any education. For many years, they were on their own feet. So suddenly we decided, here we are. And we opened our doors without any connection with them. So what I see has happened is the tourism industry is still on its own, going forward successfully. And academic community on the other bank of the river, moving forward in the same direction successfully with no bridges or limited bridges. And this continues to be the problem of yesteryear, the problem of today, and particularly the problem of tomorrow. And we are making the disconnect even more. Try to convince one of the professors of hospitality and tourism to write an industry article. They would not, because they get no credit. They get no promotion. They get no raise. So you see, we are adding to the gap. We are not, and we don't teach our students to write in the language of the industry. We expect them to do literature review, harsh language, technical language that even sometimes we don't understand. So not only we have separation of the two, but within the field of tourism education, I see segregation or fragmentation among us. There was a time I could understand every article submitted to Annals, every single article. Today, probably I would not understand 70% of them. Because we are going so deep in certain areas, actually communication among academics in tourism is not easy anymore. We don't even speak the same language in the field of education and training. So let alone the gap between hospitality industry on one hand. We should start writing articles for them. But instead we write for ourselves. I cite you, you cite me, and students cite each other, or professors, and we give them a degree. And as Don Hawkins says, you know, we have to bring the practical aspects into tourism. Tourism means practice, but we don't teach that practical aspect. We have many professors whose qualifications are education, research, methodology, but they have not worked in the industry. So the case is not getting better, it's getting worse.
Can I also add, I'll draw upon a comment which a colleague of mine made, John Tribe made once at a conference in opening his remarks. He was saying that if all the tourism programs in the world closed down tomorrow, how long would you think it took before industry began to notice? And it just think about it and take out the word tourism and put in the word medicine. If all tourism programs in the world closed down tomorrow, my word, the world would notice the very next day.
Could I also say what would happen if all of the formal associations and ministries of tourism closed down tomorrow? What would happen? It's happening. It's happening. The state of Florida is, eliminating its tourism office. So that's where push comes to shove. I have an answer to that later, perhaps, but I think it's an interesting challenge.
Okay.
And the problem is when our students graduate and they get jobs in the industry, the very students who are connected with us, they would call us the first year, second year, third year when they're on the job. But after 5 years, they forget everything. They have a total disconnect with the very institutions from which they educated.
Or they migrate to other sectors. As a service industry, we've prepared them well. They develop relationships. They find other, career pathways.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'm sure we can have more discussion on this when we enter into our Q&A section. So due to time limitation, I have my last question here for the panel. So, so since the gap still exists between the industry and academia, and just now Professor Hawkins and Professor Airey, they mentioned about relationships, collaborations. So, I would like to follow up on this. In the future, what should we do, or as a researcher, as an academic, what should we do to make ourselves better in terms of this? Or particularly for Professor Jafari, you are the editor of a book series, Bridging Tourism Theory and Practice. So do you think we have done enough research in addressing these gaps? And in the future, what should we do more to improve?
Okay, I do that, yes. I think we should stop teaching about tourism. We should teach tourism. Not just the theory of tourism. We have to practice it. You mentioned medical field. Can you imagine any medical student who doesn't have a real contact with the issues, with the problems, with the hospitals, with the clinics, with medicine, they get involved from the beginning. But our students don't have those opportunities, or we don't provide them, or it doesn't happen. The reality is not happening. Again, I know we have champion campuses like Hong Kong Polytechnic University, which is bridging the gap. But if you go across the world, you see that many campuses, many programs are totally disconnected from the education. As you said, if we close, nothing will happen to the tourism industry. I think the time has come for, well, we have arrived. Tourism has arrived on university campuses. So let's acknowledge that we have arrived. Now I think the time has arrived to transmit our knowledge in the language of practice to the operators. And if we fail that, we are not really doing anything for the tourism industry. We owe it to our students, we owe it to the industry to transmit the knowledge to them. And I tell you, I would have a hard time to write an article for the operators. And I think I'm speaking on behalf of many academic professors who have a very difficult time to translate their theory to journalistic language that can be put across. We should stop crediting only academic achievements in the field of tourism. I call to colleagues like Kei Chan and other individuals to make a case that we are a different field. We are a field of practice, and we have to transmit the knowledge, and publishing for the industry is worth something. It means something. It should be done. It's an obligation. We don't do that. We continue saying how many refereed journals, articles we published last year. So we are perpetuating the problem ourselves, I think, and we have to get out of it. Perhaps we should look at the universities that teach art. I think their professors get a lot of credit when they have exhibition. They display their art. That's academic credit for them. So how come we cannot do that? How come ours is only translated in academic journals and academic articles? I think it's our problem, and we should come up with the solution ourselves. Talk to our chancellors, to our presidents of universities, to whoever it means, to say that we are different.
I've just one thing to add to that, which I agree with. The other thing that I would say is for academics not to preach to industry. I do remember with huge embarrassment that one of the events which we organised as the National Liaison Group, this group which brought together industry and academics, one of the academic speakers stood on the platform and basically ranted at industry. This is what industry must do. Industry must do this, must do this. And this was a guy who had had no experience of operating in the tourism business at all. He had no experience other than being an academic. I just imagine if the thing was turned round and industry said, this is what academics must do, this is how you should go about your business. It is actually trying to get the industry people on your side, and for them to get academics on their side. You do not do that by preaching.
Thank you so much, sir. So, would you like to say something, sir?
Yeah, I just have one little potential solution. It was mentioned earlier by Kei Chan. We discovered also 20 years ago that the integration of distance learning with more traditional learning systems is really the best way to go. And I think in many ways these systems are emerging in such a way that if the universities want to engage, fine, there's an opportunity. If they don't, it's still going to go on. Because we've had some studies recently, particularly at George Washington University, in our higher education, it shows that those learners who use distance learning tools, advanced technology, are more likely to continue to learn throughout lifetime. So we're in a major transformation, and technology is going to be the key to finding ways in which industry can get the know-how, the knowledge, the skills, and also the theoretical foundations of what they need to do to be successful. I think we're going to find we're going to be rewarding not just degrees, but also formal certification programs as ways in which apprenticeships and other forms of learning can be recognized within industry. Last point I want to make, and I'm really concerned about the viability of some of the university programs. When a student goes through 4 years or a graduate program, they get out and they don't get good jobs. So the return on investment is extremely important for the survival of higher education. And if the jobs don't mature in this field, we're going to be in difficult straits. We find in many parts of the developing world, working right now in Jamaica, that the jobs are very poor. A lot of the students are coming out of 4-year programs and they get internships outside of Jamaica and they stay there because the conditions in their own country are not competitive. So we have many, many challenges of a human resource development, but I think technology will be one of the ways in which we address those challenges. And if we want to be on board as university and academics, fine, there's an opportunity. If not, it's going to go on without us.
Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, we are almost end of this section. Before going to the floor, questioning from the floor, we have more one question, please. And we expect that there are some young scholars. They would like to know from some advices from you. How would you like to advise or make some suggestions for young scholars who would like to have their career in tourism academia?
I can break the silence.
Okay, thank you.
It's continuation of what I just said. When I started teaching, when I started my work at University of Wisconsin-Stout, my commitment was to the development of knowledge. That was my only commitment. And it was knowledge for the sake of knowledge. So I was criticizing myself too earlier on that we got too deep into knowledge and forgot that there's a reality out there called the tourism industry. Now, some decades later, I'm changing my religion. I believe in practice now. I want to make it possible. I want to create a platform that allows us to transfer knowledge to the field to the fields that they can use it. I think we should stop. Involution should stop. Involution of knowledge should stop. It has to be revolution and movement of knowledge to the field of practice. We have warehouses of knowledge sitting everywhere called PhD theses, master theses. They're collecting dust. So I would like the trucks to go to these warehouses of knowledge, upload the knowledge, and download it in the field. We owe it to the industry. We owe it to our students. And not only that, professors, after a few years of teaching, they have to go to the industry. The same thing with medical fields and other fields. They go back to the reality. We have professors who say, I speak from experience, but ask them, how old is your experience? Oh, I did that 35 years ago. And the tourism industry, we keep telling ourselves, is the fastest changing industry. And if my experience is 30 years ago, it's not a reality anymore. So that would be what I would like to tell the next generation, what I would like to tell to ourselves, the decision makers, like the deans who are sitting here, that we have to convince the universities to evaluate us differently.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, I'll answer it in this way, that we're often told that we live in a very, very complex world, and that we are, in educating people, we're educating them to deal with a complex world, and a rapidly changing world, and a world in which jobs of today are likely not to exist in the future, and jobs in the future haven't actually yet been created. Now, if I relate that back to my own experience, of course, that is what we have also lived through, because when I first left university, there weren't jobs in tourism such as they are today, nor was an education system for tourism. And yet, over the space of 40 years, the tourism sector has changed beyond recognition as a major sector. That was a complex world. Well, how do you deal with it? And how have I personally dealt with that? Well, I've personally dealt with it partly by luck, but there are some ingredients which you actually try to go out and make the luck work for you. And those things is whatever you're working on, if you are enjoying it, put as much into it as possible, because that then is the platform for the next step. And, you know, taking my own career, I mean, I ended up working in a university. That wasn't the original thing I set out to do, but that's what I ended up doing. I worked in a university. I enjoyed it a lot. I put a lot into it. That then led, like an easy joining an escalator which was going upwards, that led to a job working on policy with the British government. I put a lot of effort into that and worked hard at it. That then led to a secondment to go and work for the European Commission. I put a lot of effort into that, which led then back to a university, ultimately the University of Surrey again for the second time, and I put a lot of effort into that. And the only thing that is a distinguishing feature in that is that I was enjoying the things I was doing, therefore I was happy to put in the effort, and it's the effort of doing the thing which actually leads you to the next step. If there is a next step, then you can are one of the ones who can get on that escalator which takes you to the next bit.
Thank you so much, sir. Should we make some suggestions?
It's coming back to the charge. What could we recommend to a young scholar, or for that matter, anyone in academics? You know, I would say try to find ways in which you could team up with industry, and maybe even through your programs and your courses offer not only academic credit but a certification. For example, in the work that we've been doing with Hong Kong Polytechnic in Jamaica, we found a way with the American Hotel and Lodging Association and Smith Travel Research to do a program that prepares people for certification. And if you're in this course, you get a reduced certification fee. So the students not only finish the academic side, but they actually get a professional certification. We've been able to do that in a number of the event, management areas, and in the hotel field there are numerous certifications. So that would be, one, route that I would suggest. The other route is by aligning yourself with industry and being recognized as the go-to person in your program as that industry-related, individual. You have an opportunity, I think, to attract the best students. It all comes down to success. If you want to be a successful business, you got to attract the best employees. If you want to be a successful university program or professor, attract the best students, and you will succeed. That's a challenge. It's not easy to do when we have a lot of negativism going on, a lot of programs that aren't meeting criteria and standards. But again, I'm so happy to hear Jafar, who's been our leader, in the transmission of the more rigorous theoretical know-how, talking about practice. Because practice and theory, I believe, are interrelated, and if you don't interrelate the two, you don't have validity.
Thank you all. So it's 10:43 now. So let's get our audience involved here. And before you ask questions, just a quick reminder. So for each person, please only ask one question, and please keep your question as brief and straightforward as possible. And okay. So we have a microphone. We need to give microphone. Right?
Thanks, everybody, for your comments this morning. I'm particularly intrigued on the disconnect between academe and the real world. And I'd like to hear more about the specific metrics that we might be able to use as a way to measure our impact on the industry. We've got some good metrics for establishing how we might affect the research base that we all know and love. But I'd like to hear more about specifically if you're going to hold each of us accountable in academe for that industry level impact, what kinds of metrics might you use as a means for demonstrating that degree of impact?
I mean, I can give you a quick answer to it. In the UK, we are now measured for our impact. And the way in which it's done is that every 4 or 5 years, whenever the Hong Kong equivalent of the Airey takes place, we prepare, depending on the number of academic staff you have, you prepare impact case studies. So you actually draw from the range of work that's been carried out in the academic department over the previous 5 years, 1 or 2 or sometimes 3 for a big department impact case studies. Now those impact case studies are measured in terms of the ways in which your research has had an influence. And now that influence could be on government policy. So if you can draw a line between the research that's been undertaken and government policy, or the way in which it has had an influence on industrial or non-industrial action, like a line drawn from the developing of a new drug that has led to action by the health service in actually developing that drug and the treatments that come out of that drug. One that I would think would actually be very useful to see is akin to research funding coming in, the amount of money that is actually coming from industry to fund research in the institution. As it happens, I don't think tourism would do terribly well on that one, but it does give a degree of objectivity as to the extent to which the industry recognizes that this is work that is valuable to them, therefore they're actually willing to pay for it. But I mean, that's an example from the UK. And I think those case studies, the general reaction has actually worked reasonably successfully. I don't think there have been cries of outrage that they haven't worked, but of course they do take a huge amount of academic time in producing the case studies, which many would argue is actually time which would be better spent on doing the research than preparing the impact case studies. But that's where we are.
I agree with David. Again, a big disconnect between what administrators want to use in terms of baseline data and progress measures and what your fellow academics want. In business schools, the fellow academics want more and more rigorous academic journal citations. That's where their head is at. But when the administrators ask, what the baseline measures are, they're interested in salary levels, placement, long-term relationships, with the industry, applied research funding, and so on. So you have a disconnect within universities between the administrators, who are looking more to the survival of the programs and the university itself, and what your fellow academics are looking for that tend to be much more in the academic referee journal publishing sphere. And we've multiplied so many journals now because of the demand to get published. I think there's over 300, and there's maybe a couple hundred in China. Bob McKirschner has been studying this, but it's amazing how many journals we have that are written by academics for academics because of promotion. Something's got to change, I think, in academics, particularly if you want to follow what Jafar is talking about, celebrating practice, and using practice as one of your benchmark measures.
I think that disconnect is difficult to connect it at this time because we have lost the culture of working with the industry. We have legitimized it to working with each other is doing the job and getting recognition. I think we have to wake up to the reality that without the industry, I don't need to teach. We don't need to have all those research papers. So it's a call for awakening to the reality, and that is not happening. I recall a dean recently told me that he gave financial rewards to his faculty who would publish operation-oriented articles. Not a single professor stepped forward, not a single one. They all want to do that. So we have to change the culture within our system, and the only way we can do it is to educate the administrators of the university that we are different.
So Hi, thank you, professors, for your sharing, and I do have a follow-up question on the academics idea. So one thing coming to my mind is about professionalism of academics, like to bringing in professional qualifications to the practitioners and so on. So I would wonder, do you see the concept of academics is kind of a route or a pathway to professionalize the market and the industry of tourism? And do you see, is there a need for really doing so, of professionalizing the industry? Thank you.
I see it two ways. One way, of course, is for the university professor to have practical experience, to use it during the teaching, and research, phases of their career, and also to continue, such maybe even through part-time, consultation or refresher courses and so on. But I also think we could have practitioners who are also brought into the academic environment. Part-time teachers, industry people who come on sabbaticals. I think it's a two-way street. We want practitioners to become a little bit more academic and academics to become a little bit more practitioner in order to be really holistic, in their knowledge of this sector.
Thank you.
Yes, we're running short of time, are we?
Okay, you can.
I was going to say, I mean, you've just made me reflect on the fact that possibly we shouldn't beat ourselves up too much, that the academic world has actually done a great deal to professionalize this industry over a long period of time. There's now, well, the students I first taught have already retired. They've actually had their whole career. Many of them have been in the hospitality and tourism industry throughout their career. I mean, obviously, the students you first teach, because I was actually not much older than them when I taught them. I was in my mid-20s, they were in their early 20s. And of course, you do actually have a particular bond with those students. And I'm still in contact with some of them. Now, I can't believe that they, in taking the sort of things that they got from a university education, and they would have been the first generation of tourism and hospitality students to go through, have not had an impact on professionalizing what was, in Britain at least, very much a non-professional type of activity. It was a trade in the 1950s and 1960s. So I think we have had quite an important role there in producing, generation after generation after generation of graduates have gone out into the world. Some of them have actually stayed in hospitality and tourism. Some of them have not. They've used the skills and knowledge and professionalism that they developed at university to develop careers in other fields. Well, good luck to them if their courses are actually doing that. But I think for hospitality and tourism, we've actually had an impact. What has actually always been quite difficult to do, from my experience of it, is for a university to open its doors to professionals who are working in the industry, including those who have got degrees from that university or from other universities, to get them to come back to refresh their thinking, either for short courses or for longer courses. Extraordinarily difficult to achieve that, and that goes back to that gap between industry and education. But I don't think we should beat ourselves up too much that there has been an effect on the tourism and hospitality business because these various schools in the world have existed.
The lady there, do we have some? Oh.
Thank you all for speaking with such passion about your long histories in the industry, and very interesting to hear the different perspectives. Recently, Professor Philip Pearce from Australia, who you all know, gave a seminar here, and he made an interesting observation for me about his career. He said as a young man that he believed in tourism theories. He thought we were seeking this kind of holy grail of theory. And as his career's developed, he's now got a view that it's more a case of patterns. He's observing patterns out there. Given the types of things you've talked about, practice and theory and so on, can you share any thoughts about your own careers and how your views might have changed over time about the role of theory and how the whole system of the industry and our tourism phenomenon works? Thank you.
It reminds me of a quotation from one of my former colleagues, Philip Naylon, who sadly has now died. In his inaugural lecture, he was talking about the development of hospitality education. He started off by saying it's all very well in practice, now what about the theory? And I think this is a lovely way of looking at it, isn't it? Because that's where we came from. We came from practice, and now what about the theory? And we've spent decades on theory, and I agree with Phil Pearce's point exactly. With an academia, developing theory has been extremely important, because developing theory is the basis on which you establish your credibility as an academic department and as an academic subject. And at a time when tourism was seeking to establish its position in the academy as a social science, of course you have to develop theory. I think, and I agree with the point that Philip was making, we've possibly overdone that in the sense that now all we do is think about theory. We don't actually think about the practice. And that's converting theory into practice is one thing that we have been really not terribly good at. And it may be that that's the change. I mean, just like we saw the change in the development from original practice and drawing upon what actually went on in industry into universities, converting that into theory, we've had decades of developing theories, some of which are good, some of which are not terribly good. Now is the time actually to turn the coin again and take that back to the world of practice.
I've tended to evolve more into more of a systems, type of an approach that can integrate, both ways, of thinking, if you will, whether it's empirical or theoretical, deductive. And I've had some success using a value chain approach, not only in work with industry, but with work, particularly in Jordan, with the higher education community, using the value chain analytical approach as a way of understanding better what we're doing, and what our outcomes are, and how to achieve them better.
Okay, thank you, professors. We have time for one last question. I think the lady here.
Thank you so much. I mean, it's such an inspiration to hear from the leaders of how much impact we can make to the tourism industry. I'm thinking more about the urgency that we need at the moment in terms of taking leadership in light of the ecological crisis and social issues that tourism industry is creating, that we as academics have to feel that urgency in leadership that we have to take to perhaps make changes in policies. And to influence the industry to think about ethics, values, and thank you, Professor, to talk about even spirituality. I mean, that's my area of research. And the other thing is, when we look at the Tourism Academy, how much is being spoken about or written about or educating our students in terms of values, ethics, and spirituality? I don't see very much movement within the tourism academy, except Taffy. I think Taffy has done a brilliant job in terms of thinking about the issues of values, but we are not talking about it enough, and we are not taking leadership enough to influence the academy and then to move on to influencing the industry, because I think it's so urgent at the moment that we have to take leadership. Thank you.
I think, to be fair, there's more than you may think going on within the academy of talking about those issues of ethics. And I mean, the most recent one that I've come across is spirituality. The group was actually thinking about spirituality, but certainly groups thinking about ethics and sustainability and all of those things, which actually being fairly well rehearsed within the academy. The problem is actually getting that out into a wider world. Well, there are two problems. One is spreading it across the academy and getting that out into the wider world. And that is where I think we're in a really difficult position at present, because I don't think the wider world for the next few years, with the present incumbent of the White House shouting his messages, it's going to be very difficult to get those messages out. Because we don't actually trust what the academics are doing. We don't trust experts. One of our government ministers said, we've had enough of experts, the views of experts. This was at the time when we were going through the debate over whether Britain should leave the EU, and economists came out with all the arguments why we should stay in the EU, and his comment was, we've heard enough of experts, we don't want to listen to experts, we want to do what we feel is the right thing. And in that world, I think the academic community is actually facing a very hostile environment indeed.
I think we should concentrate on ethics without emphasizing the terminology. As soon as you say ethics, comes across as a scientific, academic, philosophical issue. To me, ethics should be taught in every course, and that would be professionalism. We have professional standards, and those are our ethics. We don't have to call them ethics, but we have to teach it in every classroom, in and out. It could be our accounting course, it could be our front office course, could be event management course. That professionalism to me is ethics. And I have a suggestion for my colleagues not related to this question as how we can bridge the gap. I recommend to all of my colleagues sitting here, of course, continue requiring standard high-level thesis dissertation. But please, please ask them, okay, we give you the PhD, but write one article, one summary, and tell me what is the application of this 300 pages of data analysis. Make it a requirement. Actually, make the chapter, the ending chapter, application. And it would, if I spent already 3 years to do a thesis, 300 pages, can't I or shouldn't I try, summarize it to 3,000 words and give it to the industry? That's an obligation. We should do that. And, well, John F. Kennedy said, we have met the enemies, us. We have become our own enemy. We are looking inside all the time. We have to go practical, and we have not only saying it, but doing it.
I think just a brief comment, we have to get really engaged with the key issues that are challenging us, whether it's economically or ethically or whatever it may be. Climate change is, up now, but over tourism, we're hearing about that all over the world. We have to be engaged. We did maybe go back to the future, reread Valine Smith, host and guest. That was getting it right. You have to do something that meets the needs of local people who live in these communities that are destinations for visitors. We have to have the visitors who respect local people. We have to find ways in which they interrelate with each other. That's a huge challenge, and we need to be right in the middle of it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, professors. So time really flies. It's already over 11 o'clock, so let's end this session. Thank you very much for your participation. Thank you all for sharing with us.
Yep, so once again, thank you to our all three laureates. And as a token of appreciation to the Honorable Speaker variable contribution, may I invite our Professor Chong to kindly present a certificate to our speakers and also the session chairs. Professor Chong, please. The certificate is the donation appreciation by demonstrating our corporate social responsibility. We, on behalf of the speakers, to make donation to the New Life Psychiatric Rehabilitation Organization, which is the organization aims in promoting mental health and mental well-being in the communities. Yep, thank you, Professor Hawkins. Please take a seat. And may we now invite Professor Airey. Thank you, Professor Airey. Please take a seat. And may we now invite Professor Jafari. Thank you, Professor Jafari. Please take a seat. And also, I would like to thank our section chairs, Ms. Soey Lai. Thank you, Ms. Light, and also Mr. Mohammad Shahidul Islam. Thank you very much. So why don't we take a group photo together? Yeah. 3, 2, 1, cheers. So now comes to the end of the plenary section. And please take a seat.
Thank you. So particularly, we would like to thank Hotel Icon as our Diamond Hotel partner. Please give a big round of applause to them. And also, we would like to thank the Platinum sponsor, College of Professional and Continuing Education of the Hong Kong Polytechnic University, and the Platinum Media Partners, Business Traveler, Asian Pacific, and Mix. Without their support, we would not organize such a great event. So thank you to them all.
So ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your active participation in the morning. Next, come to the coffee break section at the BM4. You can take the staircase from the Sky Bridge out there or the elevator to the BM4. The concurrent paper section will be at the first floor and basement 1 at 11:30. Lunchroom will be at Silver Boss Ballroom, which is here at 1 p.m. For more information, you can find out the details from the program booklets and apps to attend the various activities. See you later.